Patent drafting, the problem solution approach. We had mentioned that the first thing you would have to look when somebody brings you a physical embodiment of their invention or gets in touch with you to draft a patent for what they conceive as an invention, say by sharing you the written material. We had mentioned that one way to look at it is to look at the invention as a solution to the problem, and to go and ask yourself what was the problem that the invention solved. Now, when we are doing this exercise, we are putting the focus on the problem. We are looking at the problem and trying to design the invention as a solution to that problem. Now, there is another option. You could just look at the solution first, that the fact that a physical embodiment was presented to you, or someone came with a detailed description of the invention in writing. So what you could do was you can look at the solution first, and you could come up with a description of it. Now, to conceive the invention as a concept, we had mentioned that the focus should be on the problem. For whatever reasons we had mentioned, we had, in the context of Lode's patent in the earlier lecture, we mentioned the problem there was the existing prior art writing instruments could not write on rough surfaces. So that was the problem. So you designed your invention, or you present your invention as a solution to that problem. Now, this is when this is a case where we consider the problem first. So that is what we call the problem first approach. And this would require you not to focus on the embodiment. You will have to look at what is the problem that the embodiment solved. A good invention solves a problem that others did not. There is an existing problem in the prior art, in the art, and the good invention solves that problem. And it differs from the prior art, and it may also correct some mistakes in the prior art. The prior art would have had some issues, and it would not have fully solved those issues. So a good invention, apart from solving the problem, it may also correct some mistakes in the prior art. Now, in this approach, what you ask is that you don't ask what the invention is, by which we mean the physical embodiment. You go ahead and ask what problem it solves. Now, this is what we call the problem first, or the problem, the focus on the problem. When we focus on the problem, this is how we take it. The other approach is you first look at the solution itself. Now, I'll just explain that, what the solution first approach is. Here you start with the solution, by which we mean you first draft the claim. Now, in patent drafting, there are two broad approaches. One, you start with the claim first, you draft the claim, then you try to broaden it to cover and capture instances of prior art, and you may look at each element in the claim, which could be, if it's a mechanical device, it could be a mechanical part, and try to cover all the generalizations of that mechanical part. This is referred by some scholars as pruning and distilling, where you could use a term in a very specific sense in the claim, in the first claim that you draft, and then broaden that to cover various other variations and improvements. Now, the claim in this case is the first thing that you draft in this approach, what we call drafting the claim first. And then you draft the descriptive part of the patent, which includes a brief description, the detailed description, the embodiments, illustrations, examples, to fit in the claim. So this is a prevalent approach, there's nothing wrong with it, of drafting the claim first and then going to the body to fit various aspects of the claim, because the claim has to be supported by the descriptive part of the specification. So in this approach, what you do is you focus first on the claim. You get the claim done first, and then you try to broaden it. Drafting the claim in this case most likely would involve you describing the invention in the manner in which you can see if it's a physical embodiment, or in the manner in which you have been disclosed by, say, through an invention disclosure form or in a detailed writing. The limitations to the claim are removed. After you draft the claim, the limitations are removed, and the claim, the language of the claim is broadened to the extent the prior art would allow it in this approach. So the claim is already drafted, and then you go through the exercise of pruning and distilling, largely, making it clearer. The specific words are elevated to a general word, like if there is glue, then you try to encompass the word adhesive, which could mean much more than the glue. So this is one approach. The limitation should aid in distinguishing the prior art. So whatever limitations are included should be done with the object of distinguishing it from the prior art. Now let's look at this diagram. Now this is a paper clip. This is a claim for a paper clip, what is called the Kona clip. Now in this case, you can read the claim there. A clip or paper fastener constructed of a single length of wire bent to form an elongated frame with an end portion of the wire deflected inwardly within and near one end of the frame and extended longitudinally along and within the middle of the device and formed, corrugated and terminating in an eye substantially as described. Now, what is new in this claim over the prior art is the fact that what is described as B. Can you see B on the paper clip? This is B, I'm just pointing it. From B, it comes to the midsection. I'm just drawing it down. As you can see the arrow, it comes down to the midsection and ends with an I. Now this was not the way in which the prior art clips were. In the prior art clip, from B, it would extend straight down A and it will go around here. This is how the prior art was. Okay. Now here they made a thing, and they mentioned in their specification that this actually brings support to the midsection because it comes through the middle. Now it could also be done in a way in which it is shown here. It could either be straight or it could be in a way in which it is mentioned, it is drawn here. Now what this does, it holds the paper better because now it comes it comes from along and within the middle of the device, which the earlier prior arts did not do. Earlier prior arts just came along and within the outline of the device, not through the middle of the device. So this was the distinction that this invention brought through. Now what was the problem solved? Fastening engagement with several sheets of papers, holding the papers together with all required security. Now this is taken not from the language of the claim but from the descriptive part of the invention, because this was one of the things that the invention was expected to solve. Now what the Kona clip or the earlier claim that you saw missed out was on the possibilities of how the claim could have covered many more things. If the claim instead was focused on the problem, and we just showed you here that it was not focused on the problem because the problem which the specification mentions, fastening engagement of several sheets of paper, holding the paper together with all security, though it was achieved through this arrangement of the end frame being extended longitudinally along and within the middle of the device, it could not capture the possibilities of the designs that came afterwards. Now some of the designs are here where it could not capture it because the wording was not focused on solving a problem. Now, there are more instances of what could amount to coming through the middle of the device, but it could not capture all these things because it was focused on the it was not focused on the problem. Now, when you start with a problem, you get a chance to determine the scope of your claim. You can capture all the current embodiments by looking at the problem. You could also capture the future products that may fall within the scope of the claim. Now, this is an approach, there are some scholars who have recommended this approach, that if you start with the claim and then go through the exercise of broadening the claim to make it look like a concept, you may miss out on certain things. Rather, if you start from the problem and then design your claim from the problem, the chances are that you would be able to draft the claim in a way in which you can catch future embodiments and future products that could potentially fall within the scope of your claim. So that's one reason why the problem first approach is recommended over the solution first approach. Now, the obvious reason for this is patents are documents that are addressed to the future. Though the patents are granted in a few years after the application, the life of a patent continues for 20 years from the date of application. So the patent needs to be relevant throughout the period of 20 years. Not all technologies have such a long lifespan, but normally drafting is done with keeping this objective in mind. Now, why follow the problem solution approach? Now, we have said that there is the problem solution approach and the claim centric approach. The claim centric approach is where you draft the claim first and then you try to broaden the claim to make it cover other embodiments and improvements. The problem solution approach is you look at the description of the invention and see what is the problem that is solved, then look at or pitch the invention as a solution to the problem. Now, the merits of doing this is, one, it brings out very clearly the inventive step requirement. By following the problem solution approach, you will be able to pick up a problem that was not solved, or at least describe your invention as a problem that was not solved or not well solved or fully solved in the prior art, and immediately bring in or get over objections of obviousness. Because when you describe your invention as a solution to a problem, then you are essentially telling that that problem was not solved. So you are telling the world that this problem existed and it was not solved, which is a requirement of inventive step. I have mentioned that the secondary requirements of inventive step, one of the secondary requirements is that if there was a long-standing problem, a problem that existed for a long time and it was not solved, that would be treated as a secondary factor for determining inventive step or a non-obviousness. Now, the patent office in Europe, the European Patent Office, follows the problem solution approach for determining inventive step. So that's important. So that's another reason why you should incorporate the problem solution approach in drafting. Now, it also defines the invention as a solution to an existing unsolved problem. We had already mentioned this, because an unsolved problem or a problem that was not solved by the people in the art, and one invention after a long period of time comes up with a solution, is one of the considerations that could go into in overcoming objections on obviousness. Now, to capture the invention as a solution to a problem, you need to make a statement. You need to define the problem solution in one sentence, because the one sentence has a significance in patent law, because almost all claims, no matter how long they are drafted in one sentence. So you will be much closer to coming up with your claim if you make the problem solution in one sentence. For instance, it could be something like the problem of dash, or the problem of X is solved by the invention Y. Now you can fill in X and Y with depending on what the invention covers. Now the problem solution is not actually the claim, because it's actually something that will lead you to the claim. So you can use it as an alternative or a working alternative before you actually draft your claim. Now you can broaden your problem solution statement as far as the prior art will allow, because any person who drafts the patent has to be careful not to get into the prior art, because that's something that could invalidate your invention. Now the problem should be stated, as I said, as in words, as there should be a statement of the problem, and the invention should be presented as a solution to it. Now let's look at some instances. Problem of managing paper. The solution: paper held between rail framework from loop of wire. So that was a solution that the problem solved. Problem: writing on rough surfaces. Solution: spheroidal marking point. So you could make your statement that the problem of writing on rough surfaces was solved by the invention involving a spheroidal marking point. Now that becomes a problem statement approach, or a problem solution statement. Now in identifying the problem, as I said, there could be an instance where the inventor would come in with a physical embodiment, walk into your room with a physical embodiment, and you could have interview and discussions with the inventor. But most likely, the inventor is going to come up with a statement. That's the inventor statement. You can call it the invention disclosure form or technical write-up, whatever you call it. You should be able to, when you read the inventor statement, you should be able to identify the problem that the inventor's invention solved. Obviously, if it's not going to be clear from a statement, then you could have interviews, you could have questions raised for the inventor to answer, and it's a long drawn process where you can figure out, or where you will be able to determine what was the problem that the invention solved. You could, once you have the description from the inventor's side, then you could look at the prior art and also see how the prior art had dealt with this problem. Was the problem solved? Was it solved effectively, or was it solved partially, or were there elements in the prior art where the problem, there was an issue in solving the problem itself. The problem was noted by people, but they did not solve it. So this you can do it. You can clarify this by looking into the prior art. You can also come up with a description on how that problem was solved. Now, the problem of writing on surfaces was solved by employing a spheroidal marking point. So the how part of the problem of solving the problem should be explained, and you try to describe this in a very general way, as we said, at the level of a concept. Now one way you would get to know the field of the invention is by looking at the domain knowledge. Now you could ask the inventor for seminal articles or literature in his field, or you could try to do a prior art search and come up with the domain or come up with articles and descriptive material which explains the domain itself. So it would require you to get into the domain which pertains to the invention and look for what has been generally described there. Examine the problem. Now you ask the question that could it have been solved earlier? Now you essentially do this to get over the objections on obviousness. You can find this by doing a prior art search and then refining the invention if it requires. Now what is obvious? Now there are instances in which drafting or pitching the invention as a solution to a problem can help you to get over certain statutory objections. For instance, combination of known substances are generally not allowed a patent. If you combine two substances and they just reproduce their existing properties, then you cannot patent it. There is an objection under section 3E of the Patents Act. You could get over that if the invention describes or is the invention shows some synergistic effect. So when you see that there was a problem the problem was not actually in combining substances, but by when substances are combined, they just exhibit the properties of their independent parts. Then you would want to get over it, or if your invention describes or if your invention has some synergy between the known substances, then you will capture that, and that synergistic effect will be will get into your inventive concept, because that's one way you can get over an objection that this without synergistic effect combinations are not granted patents. Section 3E deals with this. Now they could be from the prior art. You will also find that there was a particular teaching which the people in the prior art followed, and your invention takes a different route. What we call your invention teaches away from the prior art. Now when teaching away from the prior art is not something we expect a person skilled in the art to do. It's one of the things, because a person skilled in the art will only go to the logical step which other people in his art would take. So if you take a different route from where the prior art has been going, then that could be another way for you to show that your invention is not obvious. Now I had mentioned about secondary factors. If your invention solves a long felt need, there was a long felt need for something and your invention actually solved it, or your invention when it came out was a commercial success, people accepted it, the market accepted it, or there was repeated failure by others and you solved a thing that was which others could not do it, or the fact that your invention was copied by your competitors soon after it came out, all could be regarded as secondary factors in determining obviousness. Now these, as we go by, when these when we look at when we understand inventive step in a better way, we will see how the inventive step can be captured in the drafting of the claims. Single inventive concept is a requirement under the Patents Act. If there is only one, a patent can be only for one invention. If there are a group of ideas together, then you would group them together as one single inventive concept. We had mentioned this earlier. Section 10 of the Patents Act, Section 10(5) mentions that the claim or claims of a complete specification shall relate to a single invention or to a group of inventions linked so as to form a single inventive concept. So this is something which you will bear in mind, because you can file a patent only for one invention. But if the inventions or the ideas are grouped together to form one single inventive concept, you could still have one patent for it, provided you show them as flowing out of one inventive concept. So for each inventive idea, you will employ the problem solution approach, which means a problem solution should relate to one invention. So there are multiple inventions, you would be filing multiple patents. Now you would refine once you identify the problem solution statement, you describe the problem and you say that the problem of X is solved by the invention Y. The problem of writing on rough surfaces is solved by the invention involving a spheroidal marking point. Then you would look into the prior art and you will try to go refine and modulate this problem solution statement. You will try to broaden it, you will try to narrow it down, looking at the prior art till you get it right. Now, what are the takeaways? Problem solution approach: start with the problem, make the statement in one sentence because the claim is in one sentence, make it broad and narrow it down after a prior art search. What are the things that you will avoid? and see if the problem solution is obvious. You should do an obviousness test. What are the things that you will avoid? Don't start with the claim, though it's an approach which has been employed. It will be better for you to start with the problem and then come to a problem solution statement and then draft your claim. Avoid describing the embodiments, because that is what you will do if you would start with the claim. And patenting multiple inventions together, because if they are separate inventions, they should figure in a separate application.